Good morning, everybody. I too don't like being the ringmaster in a circus, so I'll shout and I hope you can hear at the back. Right, great. Well, first of all, thank you, Georgina, for the kind introduction. And I do prefer if everyone just calls me Penny these days, sorry. And thank you to National Farmers Federation and Soil Science Australia Queensland branch for hosting this function for National Agriculture Day. Thank you, Neil, for, as usual, a terrific and very engaging presentation. We've got a bit of a switch of pace now, and I'm not putting up imaginary photos or PowerPoints. I was asked to step in because there isn't a government representative from the federal government Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. All these departments keep changing their names, but it's DOR at the moment. But they couldn't be here, and I was asked to give an update on what's happening with the National Soil Strategy. I felt a bit apprehensive about that because I do not speak for government and government policy. In my new role as the National Soils Advocate, which I've had the privilege of holding for about 2.5 months, and I've stepped in taking over from Michael Jeffrey, who was the first National Soils Advocate, who is very, very sadly, grievously ill and had to step down from the role. But when I took up the appointment, it was made very clear to me that I am an independent voice, an advocate for soil health, for soil science. And I hesitated to take the role because, as you heard from Georgina, and as some of you know, because I work with you, including cane growers, who are on my, and NFF, who are on the Reef Advisory Committee. I've been chairman of the Reef 2050 Plan Stakeholders Group for ever since I stepped down pretty much as governor in 2014. I took over that in 2015. And chairman of the Australian Institute of Marine Science Council. And I was told they wouldn't involve a great deal of work, but they do. And I'm also, and have stayed on for nearly 10 years as National Patron of Soil Science Australia. So I said, look, I don't think I can do justice to this position. Nobody saw any conflicts of interest. They saw great synergies. And I genuinely now can talk about paddock to reef and get it much more forcefully. But I did feel that the work that General Jeffrey has done has been quite remarkable to raise awareness of the importance of soil, and more than anything else to engage high-level decision makers in government on this issue. So this National Soil Strategy that is in the process of being developed at the moment is the direct result of a recommendation that emerged from Michael's work and a report that he wrote and was finished. It was his third report to the Prime Minister about May last year. And in that report, which contained a lot of recommendations, there were 2 recommendations that the government accepted. One was to prepare a new National Soil Strategy, and the other was to have a National Soils Advocate as a permanent appointment. And of course Michael was appointed to that and very sadly has had to step down, as I said. I felt that that work needed to be continued, having an independent champion for soil and soil health, and someone who can engage at that high level the ears of the decision makers in government, because I've got a background of having been a bureaucrat for 40 years and then having been a state governor. Obviously I know a lot more about Queensland than I do about some of the other states, so I've got to up my my knowledge in that respect. But in with this national soil strategy, there's been a fair bit of scepticism out there as I have talked to people about it. You know, why do we need a new soil strategy? Why do we need a national soil strategy? Soils are very much the responsibility of states. How is all of that going to work? We've had strategies before. They've looked beautiful, they've been in nice glossy documents, and then they've been put on a shelf and they haven't been implemented and they haven't been followed up. Okay, we've got some good ideas emerging through consultations, but how's it all going to be funded? What's going to be different about this? So there's a lot of questioning out there about why we have to have it. Will it add value? Will it be useful? Will it change things? The government running this project at the moment is the federal government, this Department of Agriculture, Environment, Water, and I think it's great that they've actually put these together because they are talking to one another. I mean, each minister runs their own race, but there is a synergy and an interaction developing, which I'm seeing within the bureaucracy, which I think is very important. And I'm certainly engaging with the ministers across the spectrum. By the way, the National Soils Advocate reports directly to the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister. So in my case, at the moment, it's Scott Morrison and McCormack. But it's very important to be engaging more broadly than that. And I think it's very important for me to tell it like it is. And it's very important for me to hear the messages from others. Where we're up to, and with this strategy at the moment, is that they have completed the development of it. They've completed a consultation process. And I think many of you here will have been involved with that. They held a series of workshops and online consultations lasting over a period of several months to ask people, what are the problems, what are the priorities, what would you like to see in this new national strategy? And they got quite a lot of feedback, and there was some common things that emerged. They put out a discussion paper. It's all very pretty. Developing a national soil strategy, and that went out to everyone. They talked about it. Then they have produced, and this hasn't gone out to all the stakeholders yet, and I'm not sure that it will in its form. But this is the report on the consultations, and I thought I'd just share a little bit of this with you because this is right where we're at the moment. We have we've set up a National Soil Strategy Steering Committee, a NSC. And I sit in on that, and that has all the states and territories represented on it. And I attended my very first meeting of that yesterday, and we talked about these findings and how we are going to put them in a structure for a national soil strategy. And just let me share a little bit of this. Collaboration was the single most consistent and important thing that was identified through all the consultation processes. New arrangements need to be made to encourage and facilitate wider collaboration. This extended to the need for greater inclusion of landholders and farmers in policy and research decisions. Across the states and territories, there was a concern that some of the initial priorities for consideration were too agriculture focused. I haven't drilled down into that yet, but I think that what they then went on to talk about was the strategy needs to consider the whole spectrum of land use types across Australia, including urban soils, non-commercial soils. So that started to make more sense to me. Another theme was a renewed focus on capacity building and the education of new soil scientists. Where was this? It came through strongly, including ensuring there are clear career pathways to keep talent in the field, outreach to raise the profile within the community of soil as a vital resource, which is one of my #1 responsibilities. I think there are a couple of other more important things than some of those broad statements. A real focus on wanting to see an increase in national leadership through standards, policy and outreach, but there has to be a recognition in the national plan about regional variation, and there has to be provision in the plan for that. So they want a national framework that can be implemented on a scale to address regional issues. That also, from my perspective, seems to touch a bit on those sensitivities about who does what. Federal government, states, who pays for what. So there's obviously going to be a fair bit of discussion around that, and particularly around implementation of this strategy. There was a very high emphasis on the development of a national soil monitoring program and standards for soil data and collection. They also want to make sure that we don't duplicate, we don't reinvent the wheel, and that we should be building on existing data sets to support better baseline data. So what else was there that was key? No, I think they're the key things on that. I just thought you might be interested as my wonderful Queensland colleagues' audience. The key things that came out of each state. For Queensland, there were just 3 things: the need for collaboration and coordination across all levels of government and with industry and academia, which was good to see some decent mention of industry. The need to demonstrate the importance of soils in all aspects of life to the general public and prospective future soil scientists. The need for long-term consistent funding for all outcomes to be achieved. That's the nut. So where's it going to go? They've had these huge consultation processes. They haven't produced, to me, a lot of surprises. So how is it going to be packaged? How are we going to act on it? And within a time frame, because this is meant to be done by June next year. There's been a bit of a drag, frankly, because of COVID, and I think they're behind with drafting and getting this all put together. But the eye very clearly is on next year's budget, and the signals are that the federal government will be able to, wants to make an announcement about this for that budget. So this report, new strategy, is meant to be brought down by June next year. That's very close when you think where we are, about to head into December, then Christmas, January. So there's a huge flurry of effort on drafting at the moment. And yesterday we talked about what this document should look like and what the content should be. The aim now is to have a high-level strategy that will be presented in time for next year's budget, and then to do a series of separate implementation and action plans. So some of the detail will be in that. But we've got to get the messages in this national soil strategy right. We have to know who's the audience. Is it the public? Is it the decision makers? Is it ministers? We have to know, is this a government document that is going to connect the dots between different ministers and ministries? And I think we're still chewing through that. The discussion yesterday with the states was and territories was very valuable, but the key thing that came out to me, and you were talking about opportunities, is that what we have to do with this strategy And how we differentiate it from other things is to put it in context, in today's context. And the first thing is all those issues of pressures on the soils. So there's a whole cluster of negatives, if you like, but then there's another cluster of positives. Situating it in our context means that we've got to be talking about natural disasters and bushfires and climate change, our changing climate, that's the way I prefer to describe it, how we are adapting to our changing climate, how our soils are being affected by our changing climate connected to all these natural disasters. So put it in the context of the situation here and now in Australia, the pressures on Australian soils for all of those and other reasons, the sorts of things that you were talking about that we all know about. But then there's another heap of opportunities in our context, the context of today, and that is quite a lot of the big projects that are underway. The technology roadmap about energy, which has put an enormous new focus on issues of carbon sequestration and linking energy issues with soil issues. Put it in the context of not just the new technology roadmap, but the fantastically ambitious 2030 project for farming. That is really exciting. It's very ambitious. But what I see sitting in Canberra is these things are in silos. This is the energy minister doing this. This is the agricultural minister doing 2030. This is somebody else doing soil strategy. What we need to do in this new policy, in this strategy, is make those linkages, connect the dots, get at the state level the same thing happening. Not just saying that soils is over there in the ag department. Soils is connecting in with a lot of other things, and it is relevant not just to land management but to water management, to addressing, mitigating and adapting to climate change. So they're the opportunities, and if we can connect those dots and have this strategy sitting, a genuinely national strategy where there is some agreement between the federal level showing leadership on this and recognising those connections, and state departments and territories who are a little edgy about it, but nevertheless, yesterday in the meeting there seemed to be that disposition to collaboration, which was the point that I mentioned at the beginning. And I think that we will be able, or they will be, I'm just outside putting in my 2 bobs worth, but I think that we'll get a draft together over the next couple of months. We'll go back out. There may be another targeted, not broad, public consultation to go back to those stakeholders, in particular key ones who contributed and who have a very real stake in this, to give some feedback on a draft strategy, and then that will be presented as a very high level strategic document, and then we'll get down into some of the hard, and I hope accompanied by a funding announcement, but I don't know, but I'm assuming the pressure is on to have this done in time for the next budget. That implies to me that there's probably going to be not necessarily a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but some tangible commitment to making this work and implementing it. I'm on your time limit, so I hope that gives you a bit of a sense. It's very much my personal view. As I say, I'm an independent voice and advocate for soils, but I can assure you I want to make sure that I hear the messages, I convey them, and I give them to the decision makers. And if there are problems, if there are challenges, if there are concerns, I want to hear them so that I in turn can convey them to the people who are working on these issues. They're working with great commitment and dedication, but they are under pressure, and I think they need someone to challenge them and bring in voices from outside, not just from within the government bureaucracies. Good-hearted, but not necessarily always people who, like you, have got the practical experience and understand what the realities are. So reality checks, including from any of you who are available to talk to me at some stage, would be very, very welcome. Thank you.